Jasmine Washington froze as the flight attendant's cold words echoed through first class. "You don't belong here." But before she could gather her shattered dignity, a sharp voice cut through the cabin. "Actually, she does. And you're fired." The stranger's corporate badge gleamed Skyline Airlines CEO. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed someone standing up against discrimination, and subscribe for more stories that show justice being served. Now let's discover how a routine flight became a turning point in young Jasmine's life. The morning had started with such promise. Jasmine Washington, 17 years old, with bright eyes that sparked with intelligence, stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting her carefully selected outfit for the 10th time. A navy blazer over a simple white blouse paired with pressed black slacks. Professional, but modest. She wanted to be taken seriously. Today marked a milestone, her first time flying first class, a prize included in the prestigious national science competition she had won. "You sure you packed everything?" Aisha Washington asked from the doorway, her voice carrying equal measures of pride and anxiety. A single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep their Oakland apartment, Aisha had never flown first class herself. "Yes, Mom," Jasmine replied, double-checking her carry-on. Inside was her presentation on the revolutionary water purification system she had developed, inspired by her younger cousin's illness. After drinking contaminated water during the Flint crisis, "Your father would be so proud," Aisha whispered, blinking away tears. They rarely spoke of him. His death from cancer when Jasmine was 9 had left a wound that never fully healed. The taxi ride to Oakland International Airport passed in nervous silence. Jasmine mentally rehearsed her presentation for the Washington, D.C. conference while scrolling through congratulatory messages from her science teacher, Dr. Powell. "Remember," Aisha said as they embraced at the security checkpoint, "you earned this. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Jasmine nodded, though a flutter of uneasiness stirred in her stomach. She had felt the weight of being the only one many times before. The only black student in advanced placement classes, the only girl at robotics camp. But she had persevered, excelled even. This opportunity could open doors to college scholarships she desperately needed. The boarding process began smoothly enough. The gate agent smiled professionally when scanning her first-class ticket. "Congratulations on your achievement," she said, having noticed the science competition lanyard Jasmine wore. As Jasmine stepped onto the plane, the atmosphere shifted. The first-class cabin gleamed with luxury wide leather seats, real glassware flight attendants, providing attentive service to everyone except her, it seemed. Flight attendant Veronica Harrington, a thin woman with bottle blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, had smiled warmly at the businessman in 2A and the elderly couple in 2C and 2D. But when her gaze fell on Jasmine in 2B, her expression cooled noticeably. "Boarding pass?" Veronica asked sharply, though she hadn't requested it from any previous passengers. Jasmine produced it silently, maintaining the composed demeanor her mother had instilled in her. "Never let them see you react. Never give them the satisfaction. Economy is that way," Veronica said, pointing toward the back of the plane despite the clear 2B printed on the boarding pass. "This is my assigned seat," Jasmine replied, evenly returning the pass to her pocket. Veronica's lips tightened, but she stepped aside without further comment. The businessman beside Jasmine barely glanced up from his laptop as she settled in. The empty seat on her other side offered a small relief. At least she wouldn't be squeezed between strangers. She carefully placed her presentation folder in the seat pocket and her small carry-on in the overhead compartment. "Excuse me," Jasmine tried as Veronica passed by, offering pre-departure beverages to other passengers. "Could I have some water, please?" Veronica's eyes slid past her, as if she were invisible, continuing to serve the elderly couple across the aisle. "I'll be with you shortly," she said, but never returned. The discomfort of the situation settled on Jasmine's shoulders like a weighted blanket. She'd experienced microaggressions before, professors who expressed surprise at her academic achievements, store security guards who followed her through aisles, but being trapped in this small space for a 3-hour flight with such blatant treatment caused anxiety to climb up her throat. She pulled out her phone and texted her mentor, Dr. Reynolds, an African-American chemistry professor who had encouraged her to enter the competition in the first place. "First class isn't so first class when they pretend you don't exist," she wrote. His reply came quickly. "Remember why you're flying in the first place. Your brilliance got you there. Focus on your presentation. Don't let anyone dim your light." Jasmine took a deep breath and opened her presentation folder, trying to concentrate on her notes rather than the uncomfortable glances from other passengers who had begun to notice Veronica's selective service. Some looked away awkwardly when their eyes met Jasmine's. Others frowned slightly, but no one spoke up. This would be a long flight. Final boarding call for Skyline Airlines Flight 372 to Washington, D.C. announced a voice over the intercom signaling that departure was imminent. The cabin had filled completely, except for one first-class seat that remained conspicuously empty. Jasmine had spent the last 20 minutes trying to focus on her presentation while being studiously ignored by Veronica. The flight attendant had made 3 passes through the cabin, offering beverages and headsets to other passengers while acting as if seat 2B contained nothing but air. When Jasmine had finally managed to make direct eye contact and politely request water, Veronica had approached with visible reluctance, extending the glass with such carelessness that water sloshed over the rim, spattering droplets across. Jasmine's meticulously prepared presentation notes. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Veronica said, her tone suggesting anything but remorse. "I guess handling service in first class can be tricky if you're not used to it." The emphasis on "used to it" hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Jasmine bit the inside of her cheek, fighting back the angry retort that threatened to escape. Her mother's advice echoed in her mind. In these situations, you'll always face a double standard. Express anger and you confirm their stereotype of the angry black woman. Stay silent and you enable their behavior. Navigate carefully. "No problem," Jasmine replied with forced calmness, dabbing at her papers with a cocktail napkin that had come with the water. "It's just water." The businessman beside her briefly looked up, offering a packet of tissues from his briefcase. Here he said the first word he'd spoken since she sat down. But his eyes quickly returned to his laptop screen, unwilling to acknowledge the underlying situation. Jasmine's phone vibrated with a text from her mother. "How's first class treating my genius girl?" She couldn't bring herself to respond truthfully. Instead, she typed, "Different than I expected. Will call after landing." 2 rows ahead, a young white couple around college age had been watching the interactions with growing discomfort. The woman whispered something to her partner, who frowned but shook his head slightly. Jasmine pretended not to notice, focusing instead on salvaging her presentation materials. The introduction page now bore a faint water stain across the top, but the text remained legible. She'd worked too hard to let this derail her. Veronica passed by again, this time carrying a basket of warm towels for the other first-class passengers. When she reached Jasmine's row, she bypassed her completely, serving the businessman directly. "Excuse me," Jasmine said, her voice quiet but firm. "May I have a towel as well?" Veronica turned with an expression of exaggerated surprise. "Oh, I didn't realize you needed one. You didn't seem like you were settled in yet." Before Jasmine could respond, Veronica added in a lower tone, "You know, if you're uncomfortable here, there might be seats available in economy where you might feel more at home." The implication hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable. A few nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one intervened. Jasmine felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. The water spilled the ignored requests, and now this thinly veiled suggestion that she didn't belong. Each incident on its own could be dismissed as poor service, but together, they formed an unmistakable pattern. She thought about getting up and finding another flight attendant to report Veronica's behavior, but fear of escalation kept her rooted to her seat. What if they didn't believe her? What if they sided with Veronica? What if she was removed from the flight and missed her presentation opportunity? The college-aged woman a few rows ahead had turned in her seat again, clearly disturbed by what she'd overheard. She caught Jasmine's eye and offered a sympathetic smile, but quickly turned away when Veronica walked past. Jasmine pulled out her phone again to distract herself, scrolling through photos of her project prototypes. Each image represented countless hours of research, failed attempts, and eventual breakthroughs. She had earned this trip through her intelligence and perseverance. No one could take that away from her. The cabin lights dimmed briefly as the plane's engines powered up, then brightened again. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, announcing a slight delay due to air traffic control. "We'll be departing in approximately 15 minutes, he said. "Flight attendants, please prepare for final checks." Jasmine's stomach tightened at the thought of enduring 3 more hours of this treatment. She considered asking to be moved to economy class herself, just to escape Veronica's targeted behavior, but pride stopped her. Why should she give up what she had rightfully earned? The businessman beside her closed his laptop as the announcement ended. He glanced at Jasmine's presentation materials. "Water purification system?" he asked, noticing the title page. Jasmine nodded, cautiously uncertain whether this was genuine interest or another form of condescension. "Interesting," he said, then returned to his phone without further comment. At that moment, a commotion at the front of the cabin drew everyone's attention. A final passenger was boarding, appearing slightly rushed and apologetic. "So sorry for the delay," the new arrival said to the flight attendant greeting him at the entrance. Veronica's entire demeanor transformed instantly. Her previously tight expression bloomed into a radiant smile. Her posture straightened, and her voice took on a warm, almost reverential tone. "Mr. Reynolds, what a pleasant surprise," she gushed. "We weren't expecting you on this flight. Let me help you with your bag." Jasmine's attention snapped to the new arrival. He was a tall African-American man in his early 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, carrying a leather briefcase with a distinctive logo. She didn't recognize him personally, but something about the name and the flight attendant's sudden shift in behavior triggered her curiosity. As Veronica fawned over the latecomer escorting him to the empty first-class seat across the aisle from Jasmine, she couldn't help but notice how differently the flight attendant behaved toward this black passenger compared to herself. The contrast was so stark that it felt like a performance, one that highlighted the genuine nature of the discrimination Jasmine had been experiencing even more painfully. Marcus Reynolds settled into seat 3C, across the aisle from Jasmine, loosening his tie slightly as he nodded thanks to Veronica. The flight attendant hovered attentively, offering him a selection of beverages before departure. "Sparkling water would be perfect," he replied, his voice carrying the authoritative yet calm tone of someone accustomed to leadership. At 43, Marcus had served as CEO of Skyline Airlines for just under 2 years, the youngest chief executive in the company's history, and the first African American to hold the position. His last-minute decision to take this flight rather than the private corporate jet had been prompted by maintenance issues, but he also periodically flew commercial to experience his own airline service firsthand. "We are so honored to have you aboard, Mr. Reynolds." Veronica continued, her voice carrying through the cabin. "If there's anything special you need during the flight, please don't hesitate to ask. The same service you provide all our passengers will be fine," Marcus replied, a subtle emphasis on all that went unnoticed by Veronica. As he accepted the sparkling water, his eyes swept professionally across the cabin, a habit developed over years of assessing operations. The businessman absorbed in spreadsheets, the elderly couple sharing a travel magazine, the young woman across from him. Marcus paused his attention, caught by the damp papers the young woman was carefully separating to dry. Scientific diagrams were visible on the pages, along with what appeared to be presentation notes. More noticeable was her expression, a carefully maintained mask of dignity barely concealing distress. He observed her subtle efforts to catch Veronica's attention as the flight attendant circulated through the cabin for final safety checks. Each time, Veronica managed to look everywhere except at the young woman in 2B. Pulling out his phone before the request to switch to airplane mode, Marcus discreetly opened his executive dashboard app and typed a quick message to his chief of staff on Flight 372 to DC. "Send me the service crew roster for this flight. Particularly interested in senior flight attendant blonde, approximately 40 to 45 years old." The response came within seconds. Veronica Harrington, 15-year employee, previously received 2 excellence awards, but also 3 passenger complaints in the last year, all dismissed after review. Need more info. Marcus sent a brief negative reply before switching his phone to airplane mode. His attention returned to the young woman who was now pulling a bound report from her bag titled "Revolutionary Low-Cost Water Purification System for Underserved Communities." A memory surfaced from his corporate briefings, a press release about Skyline's sponsorship of a national science competition for high school students. The airline had provided first-class transportation for regional winners to attend the national conference in Washington, D.C. The pieces began falling into place. Veronica returned to his seat, bending down with an overly familiar smile. "Can I get you a pillow or blanket before takeoff, Mr. Reynolds? Or perhaps a magazine?" "I'm fine. Thank you," he replied, then added, "Actually, I noticed the young lady across the aisle has some water damage to her papers. Perhaps she could use some additional napkins." Veronica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, I've already assisted her with that minor spill," she said dismissively. "Some passengers aren't accustomed to the formalities of first-class service." Marcus's expression remained neutral, but he made a mental note of the comment. "I see." As Veronica moved away to prepare for takeoff, Marcus caught the young woman's eye and offered a professional nod, which she returned cautiously. The safety demonstration began, but Marcus found his attention split between professional observation of his crew's performance and the increasingly obvious disparity in service. When snacks were distributed before takeoff, the young woman's request was accidentally overlooked until she asked a second time. When blankets were offered, Veronica managed to run out just as she reached her row. Each incident in isolation might have been dismissed as poor service or coincidence, but the pattern was unmistakable to someone who had experienced similar treatment throughout his early career. Marcus had implemented diversity training across Skyline's workforce specifically to prevent such situations. He pulled out his tablet as the plane reached cruising altitude, opening a notes application rather than the quarterly reports he'd planned to review. Discreetly, he began documenting times, actions, and quotes, building a detailed record of the discriminatory treatment playing out across the aisle. Halfway through the drink service, Veronica stopped by his seat again. "Mr. Reynolds, just wanted to say what an honor it is to serve you today. The changes you've brought to Skyline have been so refreshing." "Thank you," he replied. "I'm particularly proud of our customer service initiatives. Our Equal Skies program, emphasizing impartial, respectful treatment of all passengers, regardless of background, has been a personal priority." A flicker of unease crossed Veronica's face, but she maintained her smile. "Absolutely. We always strive to make every passenger feel valued." At that precise moment, the young woman raised her hand to request service, and Marcus watched as Veronica deliberately turned away, pretending not to see her. "Excuse me," the young woman called, her voice finally rising above a polite murmur. "I've been trying to get assistance for the past 20 minutes. Veronica turned with an expression of exaggerated surprise. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there. What do you need, sweetie?" The condescending tone of "sweetie" directed at someone clearly on the cusp of adulthood didn't escape Marcus's notice. Nor did the young woman's barely concealed flinch at the infantilizing address. "I'd like a ginger ale, please," she requested, her voice steady despite the clear discomfort. "We're a bit short on ginger ale," Veronica replied. "Are you sure you wouldn't prefer something else? Perhaps something from the economy selection?" Marcus had heard enough. The flight was barely 45 minutes in, and he'd documented over a dozen instances of discriminatory treatment. As CEO, he rarely intervened directly in staff matters during flights, preferring to follow proper channels. But this situation demanded immediate action. His decision was cemented when he heard Veronica mutter under her breath as she passed by his row again. Some people just don't know their place. Marcus quietly unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, his expression calm but determined. The confrontation that would soon unfold would change the trajectory of both his company and the young scientist's future in ways neither could yet imagine. "Excuse me, Miss Harrington," Marcus called, his voice measured but carrying an undeniable authority that immediately silenced the nearby cabin conversations. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Veronica turned, her practiced smile sliding back into place. "Of course, Mr. Reynolds. How can I help you?" "I've been observing the service on this flight." With great interest, he began, standing tall in the aisle. "As CEO, I try to experience our airline, as our customers do." Veronica's smile faltered slightly. "I hope everything has been satisfactory." "Actually, it hasn't," Marcus replied, his tone remaining professional despite the seriousness of his words. "I've noticed a disturbing pattern in how you've been treating the young woman in 2B compared to other passengers in first class." The cabin grew uncomfortably quiet. Jasmine sat frozen, her eyes wide with surprise as she realized what was happening. I'm not sure what you mean," Veronica stammered, her confident demeanor cracking. "I treat all passengers equally." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Do you? In the 45 minutes since boarding, you've ignored her requests for service. 6 times, deliberately spilled water on her documents, suggested she might be more comfortable in economy class, and just now implied we're short on ginger ale, when I can clearly see 6 cans on your cart." Veronica's face flushed red. "There must be some misunderstanding. I would never." "I've documented each incident," Marcus interrupted, holding up his tablet, "including your comment about some people not knowing their place. Would you care to explain what you meant by that?" The elderly woman across the aisle gasped audibly. The businessman next to Jasmine had finally closed his laptop, now fully engaged in the unfolding scene. That was taken out of context." Veronica protested, looking around for support and finding none. "And with all due respect, sir, you haven't been on the entire flight." "No, but I've seen enough," Marcus replied firmly. "May I see your employee identification, please?" The request hung in the air like a thunderclap. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward, riveted by the confrontation. Veronica reluctantly unclipped her ID badge, her hands trembling slightly as she handed it over. Marcus examined it briefly before addressing her again. "Ms. Harrington, as CEO of Skyline Airlines, I want to make something absolutely clear. The discriminatory behavior you've exhibited today violates our company policies, our values, and basic human decency." He turned slightly toward Jasmine, whose composed expression couldn't entirely mask her shock at this unexpected intervention. "This young woman is a national science competition winner, flying to Washington to present her award-winning research. She earned her place in this cabin through her intelligence and hard work. If anyone belongs in first class today, she does." Turning back to Veronica, whose face had drained of color, Marcus delivered the words that would soon go viral across social media. "What doesn't belong on this plane is discriminatory behavior from our staff. You're fired, effective immediately." What do you think about Marcus's decision to fire Veronica on the spot? Comment number 1. If you believe immediate consequences for discrimination are necessary, or number 2, if you think he should have followed standard procedures instead. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed someone standing up against injustice, and subscribe to see the aftermath of this confrontation. How do you think Jasmine feels in this moment? Let's continue and find out. Marcus turned toward the front of the cabin, catching the eye of the lead flight attendant who had been watching the confrontation with visible concern. Carlos, isn't it? Marcus asked, reading the other flight attendant's name tag. Yes, sir, Carlos replied, stepping forward. Please arrange for Miss Harrington to be removed from this flight at our next immediate opportunity and contact headquarters to arrange for a replacement crew member if necessary. We'll delay in DC if we have to. Yes, sir, Carlos repeated, visibly processing the unprecedented situation. There's a flight attendant deadheading in economy who can cover her position. Veronica finally found her voice again, indignation overtaking shock. You can't just fire me on the spot. There are procedures, unions, reviews, all of which will confirm my decision, Marcus cut in. Skyline's zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior was implemented last year. You signed the acknowledgement form yourself. He handed her ID badge to Carlos. Please escort Miss Harrington to the crew area until arrangements can be made. As Veronica was led away furiously, whispering protests to Carlos, an uncomfortable silence fell over the first-class cabin. Jasmine sat perfectly still, her face a careful mask, despite the emotional turmoil clearly visible in her eyes. Marcus turned to address the stunned passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. At Skyline Airlines, we believe every passenger deserves respect and equal treatment. What you witnessed today was a failure to uphold those values, and we take such failures seriously. Several passengers nodded in approval, while others looked away uncomfortably. The college-aged woman who had noticed the discrimination earlier was recording discreetly on her phone, though Marcus pretended not to notice. He approached Jasmine's seat and spoke in a more private tone. I apologize for your experience today. It reflects on my company, not on you. If you'd prefer to be left alone for the remainder of the flight, I completely understand. Jasmine finally found her voice. Thank you. She said simply, the words carrying the weight of emotions too complex to express in the moment. The confrontation had lasted less than 5 minutes, but the ripple effects would extend far beyond this flight, this airline, and these two individuals whose paths had unexpectedly crossed at 35,000 feet. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere in first class had settled into an uneasy calm. Carlos had returned to announce a slight delay in their arrival time due to the crew change, but assured passengers that service would continue as normal. The flight attendant from economy, a woman named Tanya, had already begun providing attentive and professional service to all passengers, including Jasmine. Marcus had returned to his seat across the aisle, reviewing quarterly reports on his tablet, occasionally making notes. He had deliberately given Jasmine space, recognizing that his intervention, while necessary, had inadvertently made her the center of unwanted attention. For her part, Jasmine had spent the time reorganizing her presentation materials, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions. The confrontation had stirred vindication, relief, lingering humiliation, and a strange sense of solidarity with the Plies CEO, who had noticed what was happening when no one else would acknowledge it. Finally gathering her courage, she unbuckled her seatbelt and crossed the narrow aisle, stopping beside Marcus's seat. Mr. Reynolds, she said quietly, I wanted to thank you properly. Marcus looked up, setting his tablet aside. No thanks necessary, Miss Washington. Jasmine Washington. Please sit down, Miss Washington, he said, gesturing to the empty seat beside him. And it's Marcus. As she settled into the seat, he continued, I should be thanking you for maintaining such composure in a situation where many would have lost their temper. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't my first experience with that kind of treatment, Jasmine admitted, though usually it's more subtle. I know exactly what you mean, Marcus replied, his voice carrying the weight of similar experiences. Oakland, right? I recognize the departure airport on your boarding pass. Yes, Jasmine said, surprise evident in her voice. How did you? I grew up in East Oakland myself, Marcus explained. Graduated from Oakland Tech before heading to Stanford on a scholarship. This unexpected connection bridged the gap between them, shifting their interaction from CEO and passenger to something closer to mentor and mentee. I'm presenting my water purification system at the National Youth Science Conference, Jasmine explained, warming to the conversation. It uses a combination of locally sourced clay-silver nanoparticles and a solar activation process to remove contaminants at a fraction of the cost of commercial filters. That sounds remarkable, Marcus said, genuine interest replacing professional courtesy. What inspired the project? My cousin in Flint, Jasmine replied, her expression sobering. She got sick from the water there. My aunt couldn't afford bottled water for everything, cooking, bathing, drinking, so they had to ration. I kept thinking there had to be a better solution, one that didn't require constant purchases or complex infrastructure. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. So, you created one. Tried to, at least. The prototype works in lab conditions, but I'm hoping the conference will connect me with resources to test it in real-world applications. Their conversation flowed naturally as the plane continued eastward. Marcus shared stories from his early career as an engineer before transitioning to management and eventually the executive suite. Jasmine listened intently, asking insightful questions that revealed her sharp, analytical mind. The hardest part was always knowing when to speak up. Marcus admitted, lowering his voice slightly. Push back too aggressively against discrimination, and suddenly you're difficult to work with. Stay silent, and you become complicit in your own marginalization. That's exactly what my mom says, Jasmine replied. She calls it the impossible balance. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is. She works 2 jobs so I can focus on school and science competitions. Jasmine glanced at her presentation folder. This project isn't just about clean water. It's about creating opportunities. If I can win the national prize? College scholarship, Marcus guessed. Jasmine nodded. Full ride to MIT or Caltech. Otherwise, she left the alternative unspoken. The new flight attendant, Tanya, approached with a genuine smile. Can I get either of you anything? I'm fine, thank you, Marcus replied, then turned to Jasmine. Miss Washington. A ginger ale would be great, Jasmine said, returning the smile. Coming right up. Tanya responded, returning moments later with the beverage and a fresh napkin. After she departed, Marcus spoke thoughtfully. You know, Skyline has been looking to expand our community impact initiatives. Your purification system sounds like exactly the kind of innovation we should be supporting. Really, Jasmine's eyes widened. Absolutely. We have connections in several communities that could benefit from low-cost water purification. Would you be open to discussing potential implementation after you've completed your presentation at the conference? That would be incredible, Jasmine replied, unable to contain her enthusiasm. Their conversation continued as the flight progressed, touching on engineering challenges, navigating predominantly white professional spaces as a person of color, and the responsibility that came with achieving positions of influence. The higher you climb, Marcus advised, the more important it becomes to reach back and pull others up alongside you. Success in isolation isn't really success at all. Around them, the dynamics in the cabin had shifted noticeably. Several passengers who had previously avoided eye contact with Jasmine now smiled or nodded acknowledgement. The businessman who had spent the first hour ignoring her even asked a question about her water purification system when he overheard part of her conversation with Marcus. It's amazing how quickly people's treatment changes when they see someone they respect treating you as an equal, Jasmine observed quietly. Marcus nodded. understanding the bittersweet nature of her observation. That's why representation matters in leadership positions. It doesn't just change policies, it changes perceptions and behaviors. As their conversation drew to a natural close, Jasmine returned to her original seat with a new sense of confidence. What had begun as an experience of humiliation had transformed into an unexpected mentorship opportunity. Neither of them could have anticipated how this chance encounter would soon catapult both their work into the national spotlight. The seatbelt sign had just been turned off at cruising altitude when Carlos, now serving as the lead flight attendant, approached Marcus with a concerned expression. "Mr. Reynolds, sir," he said in a low voice, "I thought you should know. There's a situation developing." Marcus looked up from his tablet. "What kind of situation?" Carlos glanced around before continuing. "A passenger in economy class recorded the incident with Miss Harrington and posted it online. It's starting to gain traction." As if on cue, notification sounds chimed from several phones throughout the cabin as passengers reconnected to in-flight Wi-Fi. Marcus pulled out his own phone to find 6 missed calls from Skyline's PR director and a text message that simply read number, "Skyline Justice is trending." Across the aisle, Jasmine was staring at her own phone with a mixture of disbelief and alarm. Mr. Reynolds," she called softly, "I think you should see this." He moved to the empty seat beside her as she tilted her screen toward him. A video titled "Black Teen Scientist Discriminated Against in First Class Until CEO Steps In" had already accumulated over 50,000 views in less than half an hour. The comments section was exploding with reactions. "My friends are texting me non-stop," Jasmine said, her voice tightening with anxiety. "People from school I barely talk to. Someone even recognized my project folder and is posting about my research." Marcus processed this development with the rapid assessment skills that had propelled him to his leadership position. "Are you comfortable with this attention, Jasmine? Be honest." She took a deep breath. "I didn't ask for this spotlight, but my research actually needs attention to get funded. I'm just worried this incident will overshadow the science." Marcus nodded understandingly. "That's a valid concern. Sometimes these viral moments burn bright but fade quickly. Other times they create platforms that can be redirected." His phone buzzed continuously as texts flooded in from Skyline's executive team, PR department, and board members. One message from his chief of staff caught his attention. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all requesting statements. Decision. Before he could respond, Carlos returned. "Sir, we have a satellite call from headquarters on the crew line. They're requesting to speak with you immediately." Marcus excused himself and followed Carlos to the galley where he took the call on the crew phone. "This is Reynolds," he answered. "Marcus, it's Elena from PR," came the tense voice of Skyline's public relations director. "Please tell me you didn't actually fire a flight attendant mid-air while being recorded?" "That's exactly what happened," he replied calmly. "And I stand by the decision." A heavy sigh came through the line. "The union is already involved. Harrington's claiming she was set up and that this was a publicity stunt. We need a formal statement from you as soon as possible. Draft something that emphasizes our zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. I'll review it before we land. And Elena, make sure we're controlling the narrative here. This isn't about damage control. It's about standing by our values even when it's uncomfortable." When Marcus returned to the cabin, he found Jasmine speaking with her mother on the phone, her voice strained with emotion. "Mom, I'm fine, really. No, you don't need to meet me at the airport. Yes, I know it's all over your Facebook." She looked up as Marcus approached, relief evident in her expression. "Mom, I have to go. I'll call you once we land." She ended the call with a shaky sigh. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked, reclaiming the seat beside her. "My mom's freaking out. She's worried this attention will either be dangerous or exploitative." Jasmine hesitated, then added, She's seen too many viral moments turn ugly, especially for Black people. Marcus nodded gravely. Your mother's concerns are valid. Once we land, there will likely be media presence. You don't have to engage with any of it if you don't want to. What would you do? She asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. I'd take control of the narrative rather than letting others define it. Use this unexpected platform to redirect attention to what matters most to you, your research and its potential impact. Jasmine's phone buzzed with another notification. Dr. Powell, my science teacher, says reporters have already called the school asking for information about me and my project. Marcus's own phone displayed an email from Skyline's board chairman, emergency board meeting scheduled for 8 p.m. tonight. Explanation expected. The situation was escalating beyond what either of them could have anticipated. What had begun as a straightforward stand against discrimination had morphed into a viral sensation with real-world implications for both their futures. Carlos appeared again. Mr. Reynolds, Miss Washington. I'm sorry to intrude, but several passengers have recognized you from the video and are requesting photos or autographs. Jasmine looked mortified. Autographs? I'm just a high school student. Politely decline, Marcus advised Carlos, then turned to Jasmine. This is the strange reality of viral moments. People feel connected to you without knowing you. I never wanted to be the face of discrimination, Jasmine said quietly. I just wanted to be recognized for my work. I understand, Marcus replied. But sometimes these unexpected platforms can amplify the work we actually want to do. He paused thoughtfully. What if we use this attention to highlight your research? Before Jasmine could respond, her phone rang with a call from an unknown number. She answered cautiously, then her eyes widened. Yes, this is Jasmine Washington. You're from where? The National Science Foundation. Marcus watched as her expression transformed from wariness to cautious excitement. When she ended the call, she looked stunned. The NSF director's office saw the video and looked up my research abstract from the conference materials, she explained. They want to meet with me tomorrow to discuss potential grant funding for field testing my system. For the first time since the confrontation, genuine joy spread across her face. This could actually help get my purification system to the communities that need it most. Marcus smiled, but his expression remained thoughtful. That's excellent news, but we still need to prepare for the immediate future. When this plane lands, we'll both be facing questions neither of us anticipated when we boarded. As the pilot announced their initial descent into Washington, D.C., the reality of what awaited them began to sink in. What had started as a routine flight had become a defining moment for both a teenage scientist and a corporate executive connected by chance and a mutual understanding of the discrimination they had both faced throughout their lives. Their responses to the unfolding situation would determine whether this viral moment remained merely an internet sensation or became a catalyst for meaningful change, both for Jasmine's scientific aspirations and for Marcus's mission to transform Skyline Airlines from within. As Flight 372 began its final approach to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to taxi to a special arrival gate upon landing. There may be a slight delay in deplaning. We apologize for any inconvenience. Marcus exchanged knowing glances with Jasmine. The neutral announcement concealed the reality they both now understood. The viral video had created a situation that extended beyond social media into the physical world. How are you feeling? Marcus asked quietly. Jasmine's fingers fidgeted with the edge of her presentation folder. Nervous, overwhelmed, but also ready, I think. Marcus nodded approvingly. That's the perfect combination. Being nervous means you care about the outcome. Being ready means you'll handle it well. His phone vibrated with a message from Skyline's head of airport operations. Media presence at arrival gate. Security team standing by. Protocol. Marcus typed a quick response. Full security escort for Miss Washington if she desires it. Statement location set up in VIP lounge away from main terminal. Coordinate with conference organizers to ensure her transportation to venue is secured. Looking up from his phone, he addressed Jasmine directly. The choice is entirely yours. Option 1. We provide security to escort you through a private exit, avoiding the media entirely. Option 2. We make a brief statement together, controlling the narrative rather than letting it control us. Then proceed to your conference with security assistance. Jasmine took a deep breath, weighing the options. Through the window, she could see the Washington Monument in the distance, a reminder of why she had made this journey in the first place. If I stay silent, people will create their own stories about what happened, she reasoned aloud. But if I speak, I can make sure my research isn't forgotten in all this. Exactly, Marcus affirmed. Sometimes the spotlight finds us when we're not looking for it. The question becomes, how do we use it constructively? The plane touched down with a gentle bump, taxiing to a secluded gate area where 2 black SUVs and a small crowd of people with cameras were visible through the windows. Jasmine's phone rang. Her science teacher, Dr. Powell. Jasmine, are you all right? The concern in her mentor's voice was evident, even through the speakerphone. I've been watching this unfold online. The conference organizers called me, asking, what's happening? I'm fine, Dr. Powell, Jasmine assured her. Better than fine, actually. The NSF wants to meet about my project. That's incredible, Dr. Powell exclaimed. But listen, don't feel pressured to make any statements if you're not comfortable. Your science stands on its own merit. I appreciate that, Jasmine replied. But I think staying silent isn't the right move here. After ending the call, Jasmine turned to Marcus with newfound determination. I'd like to make a statement, a brief one, but I want the focus to be on the water purification project, not just what happened on the plane. Marcus smiled. I think that's an excellent decision. Let me make some calls to arrange it properly. As the seatbelt sign turned off, Carlos approached their seats. Mr. Reynolds, Miss Washington, we've been instructed to allow all other passengers to deplane first. Airport security is standing by to escort you through the terminal. The deplaning process moves swiftly, with many passengers offering supportive nods or whispered words of encouragement as they passed. The college-aged woman who had recorded the video paused briefly. I hope you don't mind that I posted it, she said to Jasmine. People needed to see what happened. Jasmine nodded, still processing the complexity of having a private moment of discrimination transformed into a public spectacle. Once the cabin was empty, Marcus and Jasmine were joined by Skyline's head of airport operations, a composed woman named Kendra Williams. We've prepared the executive lounge for a brief press statement, Kendra informed them. Current media count is 17 outlets, including all major networks. Conference organizers have been notified of your delayed arrival, Miss Washington, and they've adjusted the schedule accordingly. As they moved through the empty jetway, Marcus turned to Jasmine. Before we step into this, I want you to remember something important. You earned your place at that conference through your intelligence and hard work. What happened on this flight doesn't define you. Your response to it does. Jasmine straightened her shoulders, adjusting her blazer with the calm determination of someone stepping into a new version of themselves. I understand. And thank you, not just for what you did on the plane, but for treating me like a colleague instead of a victim. The terminal corridor had been cleared of regular passengers, creating a straight path to the executive lounge where journalists waited. Security personnel flanked them on all sides as camera flashes began popping from behind the glass walls. Are you ready? Marcus asked as they paused outside the lounge doors. Jasmine took a deep breath, thinking of her mother's advice, her science teacher's encouragement, and the communities her water purification system could help. I'm ready, she confirmed, her voice steady and clear. Together they stepped through the doors into a moment that would reshape both their futures in ways neither could have imagined when they boarded Flight 372 just hours earlier. Camera flashes erupted like lightning as Marcus and Jasmine entered the executive lounge. The space normally reserved for Skyline's premium members had been hastily transformed into an impromptu press conference area with a small podium bearing the airline's logo. A semicircle of journalists fell silent as Marcus stepped to the microphone, Jasmine standing composed beside him. The Skyline Airlines PR team hovered anxiously at the edges of the room, clearly still adapting to this unexpected situation. "Good afternoon, Marcus," began his voice, carrying the practiced calm of an executive accustomed to high-pressure situations. "I'm Marcus Reynolds, CEO of Skyline Airlines. Before I address what occurred on Flight 372 today, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Skyline has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. What happened today was a failure to uphold that standard, and for that, I personally apologize to Miss Jasmine Washington." He gestured toward Jasmine, who maintained remarkable poise despite the intense scrutiny. "The incident that some of you have seen on social media represents a moment when our company values were not upheld. The employee in question has been terminated, and we are conducting a full review of our training procedures to ensure this type of situation never occurs again." A reporter called out, "Was firing a flight attendant mid-air an overreaction?" Marcus addressed the question directly. "When discrimination occurs, immediate action is required. Allowing such behavior to continue for the duration of a flight sends the wrong message to both the employee and the affected passenger. I stand by my decision completely." Another journalist raised her hand. "Mr. Reynolds' critics online are already claiming this was a publicity stunt for Skyline's diversity initiatives. How do you respond?" A flash of genuine anger crossed Marcus's face before he controlled his expression. "That suggestion is not only false but insulting to Miss Washington, who endured real discrimination before I intervened. I was not scheduled to be on this flight and only took it after maintenance issues with another aircraft. There was no planning, only a response to unacceptable behavior." He paused, then continued with renewed purpose. "But rather than focusing solely on what went wrong today, I'd like to highlight something extraordinarily right. Miss Washington is not on this flight by chance. She earned her place through exceptional scientific achievement, and I'd like to give her the opportunity to speak about her work." Marcus stepped aside, gesturing for Jasmine to take the microphone. She approached with measured steps, adjusting the microphone to her height. "My name is Jasmine Washington," she began, her voice clear despite the pressure of the moment. "I'm a senior at Oakland Technical High School, and I'm in Washington, D.C. to present my water purification system at the National Youth Science Conference." She drew a steadying breath before continuing. "What happened on that flight was unfortunately not new to me. Discrimination occurs in small ways and large ones throughout many people's lives. But I refuse to let that incident define this journey." Jasmine's confidence grew visibly as she shifted to discussing her research. "The purification system I've developed uses locally sourced materials combined with silver nanoparticle technology to create an affordable, sustainable water filtration method for communities without access to clean water infrastructure. This project was inspired by the ongoing water crisis in Flint, Michigan, where my cousin became ill from contaminated water." The room's energy transformed as Jasmine spoke with passion about her work. Journalists who had been poised for controversy found themselves taking notes about filtration methods and contamination statistics instead. "Clean water isn't just a scientific issue. It's a social justice issue," Jasmine continued. "Communities of color are disproportionately affected by water contamination problems across this country. My goal is to create solutions that don't require massive infrastructure investments or ongoing purchases of bottled water. A science correspondent from a major network raised her hand. Miss Washington, can you explain how your system differs from other purification methods? Jasmine answered with the confidence of someone who truly knew her subject, delving into technical details while keeping her explanation accessible. As she spoke, Marcus watched with undisguised admiration, recognizing a natural leader in the making. When she finished explaining her project, Marcus returned to the microphone. In light of today's events, I'm pleased to announce that Skyline Airlines will be establishing a new scholarship program for minority students pursuing STEM education. The first scholarship will be named in Miss Washington's honor, providing full college tuition for students from underserved communities. Murmurs of approval rippled through the press corps. Additionally, Marcus continued, Skyline will be partnering with Miss Washington to implement her water purification system as part of our community outreach initiatives in areas currently facing water quality challenges. Jasmine's expression of genuine surprise confirmed that this announcement was not rehearsed or planned, a spontaneous commitment born from their earlier conversation on the plane. The questions from journalists continued for another 15 minutes, with Marcus and Jasmine alternating responses. When a reporter attempted to focus exclusively on the discrimination incident, Jasmine skillfully redirected the conversation to broader issues of environmental justice and scientific accessibility. As the press conference concluded, a representative from the National Science Conference approached the podium. Miss Washington, we have a car waiting to take you to the conference center. Your presentation time has been adjusted to accommodate this delay. Before departing, Jasmine turned to Marcus. Thank you for turning this into something positive, she said, extending her hand. Marcus shook it firmly. The positive was already there in your work. I just helped make sure it wasn't overshadowed. As security personnel escorted Jasmine toward the exit, Marcus watched her go with a mixture of pride and reflection. What had begun as a routine flight had transformed into a pivotal moment for his company, for a brilliant young scientist, and for the broader conversation about discrimination in American society. His phone buzzed with a message from the board chairman. Emergency meeting canceled. Proceed with full review of service training protocols instead. Press coverage overwhelmingly positive. Marcus smiled slightly, pocketing his phone as he prepared to face the remaining questions from the media. The incident would not be forgotten, but its legacy would be determined by the actions that followed. Not just today, but in the months and years to come. The grand ballroom of the Renaissance Hotel in downtown Oakland buzzed with anticipation as over 300 guests in formal attire mingled before the main event. Banners displaying the Skyline Airlines logo alongside the newly established Washington Scholars Foundation hung from the ceiling, their blue and gold colors complementing the elegant decor. At a reserved table near the stage, Aisha Washington adjusted her son's tie. Jasmine's 10-year-old brother Malcolm fidgeted in the unaccustomed formal wear. Mom, stop fussing, he protested. I look fine. Better than fine, Aisha replied, beaming with pride. Tonight is special. Indeed, the past 6 months had transformed their lives in ways none of them could have predicted when Jasmine boarded that flight to Washington, D.C. What began as a discriminatory incident had catalyzed a series of opportunities that extended far beyond one science competition. The ballroom lights dimmed, signaling the beginning of the program. Marcus Reynolds appeared on stage, his commanding presence drawing immediate attention. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. He began surveying the diverse crowd of corporate executives, community leaders, educators, and students. 6 months ago, an unfortunate incident on one of our flights sparked a conversation about discrimination that needed to happen. But more importantly, it brought attention to the extraordinary work of a young scientist whose vision deserves our support. The large screen behind him displayed news headlines from the past half year. Teen scientist turns viral discrimination, incident into clean water, mission Skyline Airlines implements, industry-leading anti-bias training, former flight attendant's lawsuit against Skyline dismissed. Tonight, we celebrate not just the launch of the Washington Scholars Foundation, but also the implementation of the first 3 community water purification projects based on Jasmine's design. Marcus gestured toward screen images showing the installation of water systems in Flint, Michigan, rural Mississippi, and a small town in California's Central Valley. But rather than hearing from me, Marcus continued, I'd like to introduce the remarkable young woman who turned a moment of discrimination into a movement for change. Currently completing her freshman year at MIT on a full scholarship, while simultaneously leading our Future Scientists initiative, please welcome Miss Jasmine Washington. The applause was thunderous as Jasmine took the stage. At 18, she carried herself with the confidence of someone far beyond her years, though her youth was still evident in her bright smile as she spotted her family in the audience. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, she began, her voice strong and clear. When I boarded that flight 6 months ago, I was a high school student with a science project and a dream of making clean water accessible to underserved communities. I never imagined that dream would be accelerated in such an unexpected way. She paused, her expression becoming more reflective. The discrimination I experienced that day was painful, but unfortunately not unfamiliar. Many of us in this room know what it's like to be judged, dismissed, or made to feel unwelcome based on how we look rather than who we are or what we've accomplished. Nods of recognition rippled through the diverse audience. What made that day different wasn't the discrimination itself. It was that someone with power chose to use that power to stand up against it. Jasmine gestured toward Marcus. That single decision created a ripple effect that brings us all here tonight. The screen behind her shifted to show images of the 3 communities, now using her water purification system, including footage of children drinking clean water from newly installed taps. The Washington Scholars Foundation will provide full scholarships to 10 students from underserved communities each year, supporting their pursuit of STEM education from high school through college completion. But equally important is the message these scholarships send that innovation can come from anywhere and that everyone deserves the opportunity to develop their potential. In the audience, Aisha dabbed at tears while maintaining her composed smile. Beside her, Malcolm watched his sister with undisguised admiration. The water purification system that began as a high school project has now been refined through collaboration with MIT's Environmental Engineering Department and Skyline's corporate resources, Jasmine continued. The 3rd-generation design is 40% more efficient and can be manufactured at half the original cost, making it viable for implementation in communities around the world. She gestured toward a table of dignified visitors in traditional dress. Next month, we'll begin installations in 3 villages in Ghana, with plans to expand to additional sites in Southeast Asia by year's end. As Jasmine outlined the Foundation's ambitious plans, Marcus watched from the side of the stage, reflecting on how much had changed within his own company. The incident had prompted a complete overhaul of Skyline's training procedures, with new emphasis on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias. Employee surveys showed improved satisfaction, particularly among minority staff members who reported feeling more supported and respected. Veronica Harrington's lawsuit claiming wrongful termination had been dismissed after multiple witnesses confirmed her discriminatory behavior. The judge had specifically cited Skyline's clear policies and Marcus's direct observation of violations as grounds for the immediate termination. More surprisingly, the incident had sparked industry-wide conversations about discrimination in customer service, with several competing airlines implementing similar training programs and zero-tolerance policies. Jasmine concluded her speech by introducing the first cohort of Washington scholars, 10 students from across the country, whose academic achievements had earned them places in the program. As they joined her on stage, their diverse faces reflected the Foundation's commitment to supporting talent from all backgrounds. These scholars represent the future, Jasmine said, beaming with genuine pride. They remind us that when we remove barriers to education and opportunity, We all benefit from the innovations, discoveries, and perspectives that might otherwise have been lost. The evening continued with dinner and further presentations, but the most meaningful moment came during a quiet exchange between Marcus and Jasmine's family. "Your daughter has accomplished more in 6 months than most people do in decades," Marcus told Aisha as they stood near the dessert table. "You must be incredibly proud." "I am," Aisha replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But I'm also grateful, not just for the opportunities she's received, but for the example you set that day on the plane. You showed her that when you achieve a position of influence, you have a responsibility to use it wisely." "She would have found her way regardless," Marcus said with certainty. "Some people have a light that can't be dimmed, no matter the obstacles placed in their path." As the evening drew to a close, Jasmine and Marcus stood together near the stage, watching as guests continued to explore the exhibition of water purification prototypes and foundation materials. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when you got on that flight?" Jasmine asked. Marcus shook his head. "Not remotely, but it reminds me that our most important moments often occur when we least expect them. The question is whether we'll recognize them and rise to meet them when they arrive." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "My science teacher used to say that the most significant discoveries often come from unexpected observations." "A wise teacher," Marcus replied. "And now you're teaching all of us." The Foundation Gala marked not just the formal establishment of a scholarship program or the celebration of a technological innovation. It represented the potential for individual actions to create systemic change. How one moment of standing against discrimination had cascaded into opportunities that would benefit countless lives for years to come. As Jasmine rejoined her family and Marcus turned to speak with board members, both carried the quiet recognition that their unexpected encounter at 35,000 feet had forever altered not just their own trajectories, but potentially those of communities around the world, proving that sometimes the most powerful catalyst for positive change is simply the courage to stand up for what's right when it matters most. This story reminds us that discrimination often thrives in silence. When Marcus witnessed injustice, he could have followed standard procedures or looked away like other passengers. Instead, he took immediate action, showing that those with privilege and power have a responsibility to use it for good. Jasmine's journey teaches us about resilience in the face of prejudice. Rather than letting discrimination define her, she redirected attention to her scientific work, transforming a negative experience into a platform for positive change. The most powerful moments of transformation often occur unexpectedly. Both Jasmine and Marcus entered that flight as strangers, with different goals, yet their paths crossed at precisely the right moment to create lasting impact far beyond one incident. True leadership isn't just about holding a position of authority. It's about having the moral courage to stand up when others remain seated, speak out when others stay silent, and take action when others merely observe. What moment in your life required you to stand up against injustice? Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you had spoken up? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story inspired you, hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of courage and transformation, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one person's actions can create meaningful change. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters, especially in those unexpected moments that test your character and values.